Hey everybody, this is Cameron Rasmussen, and I'm going to explain everything that I did theory-wise for the All of Me solo jazz guitar piece, so you can understand how I used all the theory in it. Yeah, so here we go. This is the very messy chart that I used. Hopefully you can see it. Just copied down the original two courses and kind of manipulated it from there. So I started out with a 4-bar intro, and it was really a chromatic ascending thing starting from the C major, and I harmonized the chromatic notes with diminished 7th chords, and then at the end of it I used a little E7 sharp 9 chord to kind of a crunching chord before I walked a bass line down to bring us into the C, which is where we start the first bar of the first chorus. Played the C that was written and basically played the melody that as is, with a little beating around the scale in there. And moving into the E7, I did a variation of the melody where the rhythm was basically the same, but it was basically a transposition of the melody up in a different inversion of an E7. Going into the A7, I did a different inversion of an A7 where I did a reharmonization as well on the melody note landing on the and of 2, and then kind of went through some cool kind of chromatic things where I did an F diminished 7th chord, and then walking from that F diminished 7th chord I walked up a little minor thing, and instead of playing the D7 I played an F sharp, instead of playing the D minor 7 I played an F sharp minor 7, and I can't really tell you what that would be, it just sounded really cool. Kind of be like a major minor 3rd from D, I guess. Anyway, and so just beat around that chord from there in the scale, and then moved to the E7 where I did a contrary motion where I had the original melody in the bass line contrary to the top line, which were both chromatic lines, and going down to kind of an E13th voicing for that specific part of it, and then walked a bass line up to an E major 7, and then into these next two bars here I used the E major 7 going to an A major 7 instead of the A minor 7 written here, which would kind of be like a 5-to-1 to the A major. For those two bars, just kind of beat around the melody and just played with some rhythms, which is kind of where a little bit of improv came in for just doing a piece like this. Then moving into the D7 here, another contrary motion line, which is very similar to the theme that I used for the E7. Then I did a little bit of a walking bass line down to the 2 of the D, and then go into a high voicing of a D minor 7, and walking up that scale to the high G, and 2-5-1 back to the B section of the course. I did a high C major 7 voicing up on the 13th fret, and just did some tapping around the scale. Nothing really outside of it at all. From that I moved into the E7 where I did a just kind of beat around the scale again, and then I kind of did a contrary motion thing again, except I pedaled specific notes, flat 7 and then the flat 5 of the E, and then walked it kind of the top line down an A Dorian kind of form to the A7. And for that A7 I kind of looked at the A7 as the 5 of a D major, I guess, so I did a 6-2-5-1 and imposed that over these two bars. But I then moved it to this D minor where I kept it minor, so it kind of had a cool sound to it instead of going to that major from the 6-2-5-1. Again, kind of improv'd a little bit of melody and rhythms in there. Then I did for this F6 and F minor 6 part of the last few bars of the course. I did a chromatic bass line down while holding that F6 chord for those 2 bars. Then I, for these next 2 bars here, for C major and then into the A7, I held a high B, but then walked the kind of bass line down that's in the melody, moved it up to a high C about where the A is, and then went into an A13th voicing for here. And then for the 2-5-1 back to C, I just kind of improv'd a little bit in D, went to a G7 voicing for the 5, where I kind of went 2-3-1 in C, and then brought that 3 down to the C for that 1. Then I did a contre motion line in C to bring it back to the second course that I did, where the top line started at 5, went up to 1, and the bottom line started at 1 and kind of went to 5. This kind of sounded really cool. And it brought us to the second course, start on the C again, but kind of held that high C and walked a bass line up through the C scale, nothing any more fancy than that. And when I got to the E7 of the second course, is where things got really cool and really awesome sounding, where I did a bunch of circle of fifths sounding things, where, or circle of fourths really, where I walked it up. So E7, walked it up to an A major 7, and then translated that to the A7, which is the 5 of D. So then I moved that down to a D major 7, which is everything I did in these 2 bars. From that D, I went to a G, so it was really a 5-1. So I did a key change to the key of G, and that was just actually pay no attention to that. That was just a G major triad that I did for these first 2 bars, and I kind of played the melody, but in G for this part, and then went to kind of went to a minor 2, so I did an A minor 9 for that, and then came into an E major kind of chord, which would really be a major 6 for this specific part of the key of G. And then went to an F sharp minor 7 flat 5, so the 7 of G, and then walked up a 1, 2, and then back to G, and then walked that low bass note of that G major 7 down to a G7, so the 5 of C, went back to the key of C. Then I did a chromatic bass line upwards, still in the key of C, so that chromatic bass line brought us to a C major 9, moved that up to the E minor 7, and then it's kind of like the turnaround of the thing already, and so I did an E minor, E diminished 7, G diminished 7, and then I went to the A minor 7, which is really the last part of the thing before the turnaround. And instead of doing a 2-5-1, I kind of did a kind of a reharmonization, I guess, with an F major 13th, G major 13th, walking up the same kind of melody movement. And this is where I kind of played with the form a little bit. I extended the actual form of All of Me by 2 bars, because the B section of this course actually starts right here. So that's why it sounded kind of jarring when I went into this part, because it didn't actually follow the original number of bars of the piece. So from that, walked back into the C6 voicing and kind of improv'd some little melody lines from the C6, E7, and then into the A, and even the D. So for this part, just kind of played around with those scales and tried to have some contrasting lines between the 2 of them, and so that went through there. When I got back to the F6 and F minor 6 voicings, I basically played the melody as written on a high D minor shape, I guess, chord it would be, but played the melody as is for those 2 bars, and then played a high voicing of a C major 7 again on the 13th fret, and then did a chromatic run up of 7th chords to the high A7, and for the 2-5-1 again slid down to a lower D minor 7, and now it walked up to the 5, the G7. Then I kind of delayed the resolution to the one with the G sharp minor 7, which sounded really nice if it went to an A minor 7, and then held that for kind of 2 bars, and then went back to an actual D minor, G7, and then 2-5-1 to the C, and then it ended on a C major add 2 voicing, and that's what it was. So I hope that was eye-opening for all of you.